My name's Judy Sweets, and I'm a retired archivist. Now I'm a historical researcher, mainly specializing in the Underground Railroad, and especially in Douglas County. I've been actually doing that for about 20 years now. And I've been connected with researching the Grover Barn for a long time. Been very much interested in preserving this barn. The stone barn is one of the best documented Underground Railroad sites in Douglas County. And they estimate that between 300 and 1,000 freedom seekers came through Douglas County between 1857 and 1860. And of course, the problem with that is we don't know most of their names, and we don't even know the exact number that came through. That's just an estimate. In 1859, John Brown came through with 12 freedom seekers, and we know a lot about them right now. We know their names, we know their ages, and about their personality. This has been very interesting to be able to look at old documents, census records, death certificates, things like that, to find out more information. John Brown saw them off at Detroit when they crossed the river into Windsor, Canada. And at first, for about 3 weeks, they stayed with a woman who is an abolitionist named Mrs. Bibb. Shortly after that, they had their own place to live. The Harpers did. There was a couple named Sam and Jane Harper, and they had their own place in Windsor, Canada. And then the Daniels family had their place in Maidstone, Canada, both in Ontario. In August 1st of 1859, I just recently found out that they were amongst the whole group of the 12, were amongst a group of 7,000 people who attended it was a celebration about the emancipation of slaves from 1834. And so they were there, and they said they were looking well, and they were really enjoying being able to celebrate coming with John Brown and just being there and enjoying the festivities.
And that was the celebration of the end of slavery in the British Empire.
Correct, correct. And actually that's the date, my understanding is 1834 is when they became free in Canada. That's when it was unlawful to have slaves in Canada. Sam and Jane Harper had a child, actually maybe about 7 years after they got married, and and she was probably about 40 years old then. He was a lot younger. So they had a girl named Sarah, and then later on they did have some grandchildren too. And we do find them on this census records with their ages, and they were Baptist. He was, Mr. Harper was one of the founding members of the Baptist Church in Windsor. I guess it was African Canadian church. Whereas the Daniels were Methodist, and they were in Maidstone, as I mentioned before. 1895, Wilbur Siebert from Ohio came up to interview them as people that had been on the Underground Railroad with John Brown. And so we have a whole interview of both Jane and Sam. And it's kind of put in colloquial type, accent, but they do give some very interesting information about, things that had happened to them. And Sam was saying, I thought this was kind of cute. Well, Sam said, my former slaveholder came up and tried to get me to go back with him down to Missouri to go back to work, and he said, I told him, you must be a fool to think that I would do that. Another thing is, in 1894, they had their picture taken together. So, you know, it's so rare to have pictures of former slaves. So they were dressed up in their finest, and, you know, they probably look a lot different, a lot older, of course, from when they were with John Brown, but it's a very good picture of them. We don't really know what happened to the Daniels family, but in 1895, I guess it was Jane said that the only people still remaining from their group of 12 was them and the boy that was living in Detroit. And first people thought, researchers thought that meant their boy, but really it meant John Brown Daniels, the Daniels boy. And he apparently had gone to Detroit and was working in Detroit. Now in 2012, January of 2012, I was able to find out where the descendants of Sam and Jane live, and they are living in Windsor, Canada. So they're still there. And I got in touch by email with one of the descendants. It was actually the wife of the descendant, and she's a genealogist, so she understands research. And I told her, did you realize that your husband's family came on the Underground Railroad from Missouri with John Brown? And she said, no. She said, we knew they were from the United States, and we thought they probably came on the Underground Railroad, but we had no idea that they came with John Brown. Well, because in 1850 there was a fugitive slave law and Slave Act, I guess they call it, and that prohibited anyone, you know, taking people on the Underground Railroad or even runaways. You could be taken back to their slaveholder or jailed. If someone saw them, they were required to take them to jail, put them in jail till the slave owner got there and picked them up. So there were some slaves that did change their name sometimes or disguise themselves, and they would maybe go to Philadelphia or somewhere like that and get a job. And like I said, if they changed their name, maybe someone couldn't find them, but it was more risky, and they were sometimes recaptured, so that they would be safer in Canada. The other thing a lot of people don't realize is that the Underground Railroad also went south, and a lot of people went to Mexico. And so, you know, they're doing more research now, finding some people didn't even realize that their people had come on the Underground Railroad to Mexico. And so that's something new too that we're just discovering. I think very few. It's not wise to know very much, because the more you know, then you know they could get it out of you. And so I do feel that the people that were on the main route, which can change from time to time, but the Silas Soule family, for example, they knew, because they were the station that he came to before they got here. I think they would know about Grover's Barn, but but you might not know where they're going next. So I think they didn't want to know. And I know Reverend Cordley, who he and his wife kept a young lady for 3 months over on Vermont Street, and he wrote later on that he did not know where she went, and he really didn't think most people knew where they went next. They don't want to know because they know it's too dangerous to know too much. A man lived here named Samuel Reed, and he was a friend of Joel and Emily's, and he worked for the family here back in 1859, and he actually saw the Freedom Seekers when they were here. And you know, he wrote about it in his diary, but he was still trying to be kind of secretive. He did say, I saw the 12 and I think I will see them again. But you know, it's dangerous to put too much in there in the diary. And so he just made he made 12 marks, 12 dashes, and he said, do you know what this means? And I think he was writing to his sister at the time, but he didn't really tell her what the 12, but we know what the 12 means, you know. And he said, I'm going to have to make 12 more. So we got the impression maybe some more people were coming through. We have so few here in Douglas County. I mean, this was the center of this is the epicenter back in the 1850s. People would open their paper in the morning and what's going on in Kansas, and especially Lawrence, because this town was founded on an ideal of freedom. And so, like I said, it's sad that we have lost so many of our historic sites through the years from one thing or another. And so this is, as far as I know, this is the only still standing Underground Railroad structure in Douglas County, or not in Douglas County, in Lawrence. And so I just feel like it's very important to preserve it. We know so much about John Brown and the 12 and some other people that came here also. And you know, I just feel like it's been saved for a reason. And it's great that people will be able to come here and see this and learn about the history.